Welcome to the Human Resources Committee of the Whole for the Rochester Board of Education. Today's date is January 24th, 2023, and this is our first HR meeting of the year. And we have no speakers tonight. And Commissioner Powell is absent today for an excusable reason. I just want to put that on record. And we have a review and acceptance of the minutes from the November 15th, 2023 meeting. Can I get a motion for the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Malloy, seconded by Commissioner Adams. Thank you. All those in favor? Any questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Are you taking the vote?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm not.
Up next, we're doing a formal introduction to our Human Resources Parent Rep, Tamika Jackson. And I'll turn over the mic to her. I think is she on Zoom? Okay, perfect. So I'll let, you're here, Mika? I'm gonna turn it over to you and then I'll say some words about you. So you could do a quick introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tamika Jackson. My daughter.
Mika, Mika, I'm sorry, can you turn your camera on? Or no? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. My daughter's name is Malaysia Greathouse. She's a student at SOTA, School of the Arts. Before that, she came from charter school. So I sat on the charter school board for Discovery Charter School for about 4.5 to 5 years. So I have a good background in being on the board, so I understand what's going on here. I've known Beatrice for a long time, and she's the one who asked me about being the parent rep for the board. I want to apologize. I wasn't able to make it today. My daughter actually has pink eye. We had to go to urgent care to handle that, so that's why I'm not in attendance today, but I plan to be in person at future meetings.
Thank you, Mika. And so, as Mika mentioned, Mika is actually one of the parents that I met when I used to have a program at MCC for first-time moms. And Mika was one of the first parents that we enrolled into the program, and who was very successful and completed and graduated. And is also working to build. She's an entrepreneur, and I thought her being on human resources would give her some additional skills as she figures out how she builds and grows her business in this community, and really active in other ways. And I think she brings a wealth of knowledge and experience as a parent who has been in different systems too. So welcome, Mika. We look forward to working with you. And just as a reminder to the community, the HR Committee of the Whole meets every other month as a committee of the whole, and in between, as needed, we will be giving reports and HR-related matters at the board business meeting with the same format that we run finance, which also meets every other month, but has a finance component at the board business meeting when we don't meet as a whole. Up next is our staff retention and staffing update, building a workforce our students need, and presenting that tonight is Dr. Miller, who's our Chief of Human Resources Capital.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Vice President LeBron, President Elliott, commissioners. This evening, I'll be presenting updates on our staff retention and ensuring that we're building a workforce our students need. I just want to thank the board for the opportunity to share and to advocate. The Office of Human Capital, we work and we strive to recruit, develop, support, and retain the most effective, diverse staff. That's our mission, that's our charge. This evening, I'm going to share briefly an update on current vacancies, some staff retention data, and some staff retention initiatives. Our vacancies as of January 13th are reflected here, and you can see that we continue to have some vacancies in the district. We are at about a 3% vacancy rate at this point, with just under 2% of our teachers. While the numbers may seem significant, this is consistent with what we're seeing post-pandemic, and I'll speak to some of that this evening. I also want to remind that vacancies are those that are vacant because no one is in the position, or they are covered by per diem subs. When we make the decision to fill a position with staff who may be long-term substitutes, we no longer consider that a vacancy because the position is filled. However, we still have an obligation and a duty to work to recruit to fill with fully certified staff. I would draw the attention to the start of the school year where we did hire about 135 teachers who were working still on their certification, and we've developed teacher certification action plans for each of those individuals, and they are making progress, and several of them are already fully certified, and I provided an update on that in November. We are still challenged in the areas of civil service, particularly in the hiring of custodians, assistant custodian engineers, specifically because of the additional boiler licensing requirements there, and we are working and need to work greater to develop a pipeline program to grow our own individuals who can obtain that license, that boiler license that the city of Rochester requires, and to ensure that we can have a pipeline for that purpose to grow our own from existing staff that are in lower titled positions. We've also been challenged significantly in our clerical positions. School clerical in particular are the face and play an important role when students and families visit our schools. Our staff rely on them for a variety of reasons, some of which I'll advocate for later this evening. We are calling for some reforms to the civil service process, and I know that that's part of the legislative agenda that the board is also looking at. Relative to teaching vacancies specifically, you see the breadth of where they are and in what areas. As has been consistent the last several years, we have been challenged in the areas of bilingual, ESL, special education, math, science, and speech. And so those are key areas, and you'll see on a later slide over a period of the last 5 years how we have lost staff in those areas. The emphasis of our work is to ensure that there is recruitment and retention of the most effective, diverse staff. And everything that we do as a school district and as a school community, it either attracts or discourages prospective hires. And everything that we do as a school community is either attracting or discouraging our current staff. And so we all can play a role in how we recruit and retain staff, leaders in particular who lead people, their teams, the people that work with them. They need to be cared for, valued, respected, and we need to talk to staff to understand what their concerns are at a supervisory level so that we can change conditions, and I'll speak about that in a little bit as well. Why do teachers in particular leave the profession? What you see here is a series of data that was collected in 2019, and I'll present some more recent data. But this speaks to the reasons that teachers have considered leaving the profession. And as you look at that list, you see the range, but you also see things that should not be surprise, right? All of these things can have an impact on teachers' ability to want to remain where they work. And we see these reflected in exit interviews and in conversations formally and informally with staff or through union leadership, that these are things that are given as reasons for why people leave the district. The pandemic further exacerbated the ongoing difficulties that urban school districts like ours have with recruiting and retaining staff. We also are challenged because, additionally, our suburban counterparts are also struggling to retain and recruit staff. And one of their pipelines is to recruit our teachers who are well prepared and experienced. And so they don't have to be as creative as we are, right? We have to be super creative in growing our own, and we need to be super creative in how we think about the retention of our staff. Even before the pandemic, some high-need schools and school districts struggled with recruitment and retention, but as a result of the pandemic, there have been school districts that have seen as much as a 30% turnover in staff. And tonight I'll go through what attrition looks like in each of our union areas. What we also have seen as a result of the pandemic is an increase in inflation, right? The cost of things going up. And so we've heard additional concerns from staff and others about compensation and whether the compensation is meeting the realities of our economic situation. What we have also experienced as a result of the pandemic is an increase in mental health concerns for our staff. You can talk to people in our field, in the field of education, and you can hear that people are stressed, right? So this slide reflects post-pandemic data from the National Education Association. And again, I don't think, for anyone who works in the field of education, nothing on this slide will be surprising, although the last bullet point, I think, was surprising to me. I would not have anticipated that the percent would be that low, that only 10% of educators would recommend the teaching profession to a young adult. That is truly compelling. And for those of us, right, I think educators get into the profession because they want to have an impact, they want to influence young people, they want to make a difference. Their heart is in it for those reasons. And so it's very sad to me as an educator that's how colleagues feel, and I understand it. The other thing I will call out is that because of recruitment issues, 80% of our educators, right, across the nation are feeling similarly, that they're taking on more work due to unfilled job openings in school districts, and we know that as well. Through the next few slides, just to provide some level set definitions, the next few slides will reflect data from 2017-18 school year through the 2021-22 school year. And as a reminder, school year is from July 1st to June 30th. Attrition is defined as the departure of any employee from the organization for any reason, whether it's voluntary or involuntary. The data on the next few slides does not include our substitutes, and you have the definitions for each of our unions, which will be reflected on each of the next several slides. So as just to basic orient our viewers and everyone to the slides, you see that we have data for each of the 5 years that we looked at, the number of staff, because this is all staff, who retired, who resigned, who were laid off, who were terminated, the total number, and then what that is as a percent, okay? I think it's important as you look at these slides to consider the year 2017-18 separately from the school year 2021-22 and to do that comparison. And why? Why is that? Well, in 2018-19, we started to experience layoffs, and in 2019-20 and in 2020-21, those were the COVID years. And so if you want to look at a pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic, I would just draw your eyes to the attention of looking at 2017-18 versus 2021-22. Not to ignore those other years, but I think those are important call-outs. The other thing that I would call out is we had a retirement incentive that was in place that impacted data in 2018-19 and in 2019-20. So depending on when someone put in to take advantage of that retirement incentive, there's data that reflects on both of those years. And it also is an explanation for why you might see higher numbers of retirements during those years, okay? On the next slide, specifically to our teachers, again, you see the significant number of retirements in 2018-19. Yes.
I'm so sorry.
Please.
I have some questions. So can we put a pause for this one before you go to the next one? And I'll start with President Elliott and then Commissioner Malloy, and then I'll you have any questions? Okay. All right, President Elliott.
Thank you, Vice President. So I'm looking at the slide with regard to RTA resignations, and it appears that the positions that resigned the most are special education teachers. You look at it in 2017-18, there were 17 there, 30 in 2018-19, 44 in 19-20, 30 in 2021, and 35 in 21-22. What's happening there, Dr. Miller?
So specifically, you were asking about special education teachers. So I've advanced this slide. What this slide shows is that for each of the 5 years, just isolating and looking with a little bit greater detail about the number of resignations by content area in each of the areas. And so what President Elliott is asking is about special education teachers. Certainly, I have on this slide bolded for easier reading and comparison across the years those areas that I called out earlier that we struggle to both retain and recruit because of available labor in those areas, people that are going to school in those certification areas. And because special education is an area that colleges and universities are struggling to enroll students into, there's a significant shortage of those teachers, which then means all school districts are struggling to hire in those areas. And so what we experience in the Rochester City School District, particularly in those areas that I've bolded there, is that we are losing people to suburbs in these areas. This is where suburban recruitment is taking significant numbers of our teachers.
Thank you. So what is our strategy? You know, they're coming to get our teachers, but why can't we keep them? I mean, we're going to have to look at that. What are they offering that now, you know, they're trained, but, you know, they're going elsewhere, you know. So, you know, particularly because special education is an area for us under the dissent decree, and, you know, how do we overcome that? Given that we've got a dissent decree, we've got to make sure that we've got, you know, these special education teachers that are going to remain in our district. So I just point out to the superintendent and to yourself, we've got to be as aggressive in retaining our special education teachers as the suburban areas are in recruiting them. So I'll just leave that right there. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Back on slide number 4, just talking about current staff vacancies as of the 13th, you talked about the facilities and custodial positions, and that was mostly because you said we need people who are trained on boiler certification. And I'm wondering, is that something, when we think about pipeline programs for our students, that perhaps through some CTE program, is that a certification program that we can add to an existing training program that we have for our students? So we're literally growing our own for those types of positions and then managerial positions later on. And similarly, for our, I know food service in the past, finding those food service managers has been, and the certification required for that management has been a huge issue, and then retention of those Bente employees. Is that something that we can add to our current CTA training programs as well? So I'm just wondering if that's something that we've considered or that we can start looking into. Yeah, so it was the pipeline thing, but then I actually have a question about when we were comparing some of the numbers later on. I think it's slide, the all-staff attrition. So I understand why the 2019-2020 year, the layoffs were 323. I know we experienced, this was prior to my getting on the board, but I know we experienced quite a few layoffs district-wide. But it looks like the 349 for 2021, and that's the COVID year, Does that include all of the Bente employees that we laid off that fall? Is that what makes up the bulk of that number?
Yeah, and in fact, on slide 15, it's broken out there that in that year, we laid off 203 Bente staff.
Okay, thank you, that's what I wanted to know. But thank you, I'm really interested in knowing more about pipeline programs that we can offer our own students to help grow our own, not just in teaching, but in some of our facilities and other types of programs.
That is part of our plan, and we need to work with programs like OASIS to do that, right? It used to be, school districts used to, including the Rochester City School District, used to have programs to prepare tomorrow's clerical today, right? And students might graduate from a high school program ready to do that work. We're at that point again where we need to prepare students for those kinds of jobs and positions. Some of it is helping the public in general understand the civil service process and the challenges with the civil service process to guide and to help people. We need supports in place to help people be ready and prepared at an education level, but then also to navigate the system so that they can be employed.
All right, Chris. You're all set.
Okay,
Thank you, Dr.
so
Miller.
just to pick up back on this slide, again, you see the difference in that retention is a continuing ongoing problem with our teacher population. You see and you hear this specifically, and it's broken out on that slide. We kind of highlighted this slide in terms of the numbers, and it is a problem that we need to address these areas. Certainly, there are we look at the data, right? And if you go back to the earlier two slides, it speaks to the data about why people leave. Each of those things are then things we need to address, right? If compensation is a key factor, then what can we do to address compensation? What can we do to make things more desirable? What can we do in the schools to look at caseloads that teachers have, right? What supports are in place to ensure that teachers are successful and ensuring that this is a good place for them to work, that it is safe. So all of those things, those are the things that we hear from teachers that we would want to address. This slide reflects last in, first out. We wanted to do here was provide some data specifically to staff who are laid off, and are they or were they people of color? And so what you see on this slide is that the numbers and the percent of the total staff who are of color. There has been a push to hire more diverse staff, and there's been an assumption that if we hire more diverse staff, they're going to be the last in, so they will be the first out, because when we lay off, we go by seniority. And this shows that, but it shows that it's not the majority, but still is something we need to keep our eye on, right? On this slide, we have ASAR. ASAR represents both our building leaders and our district leaders, and then also people who work in central office in varied positions, such as in the finance office is one example.
Dr. Miller, Commissioner Malloy has a question.
Just about the prior slide, just the RTA, the last in, first out. What I'm curious about is, although those numbers appeared like you have 32% of those laid off were people of color, but what percentage of our teachers of color does that represent? Does that make sense? So although that might only represent 32% for 2018, 2019 of the people who, what percentage of our teachers who are non-white, what percentage of our overall teaching population does that represent then? Am I making sense here?
Yes, and I think the last presentation, I think it was like at 25% of our teaching force are staff of color, so Black, brown, Asian, other, non-white. So I'm assuming that we then would have to calculate the 32% of that 25%, yeah.
Because it just seems more alarming when you look at it that way, and something we not only want to keep our eye on, but address.
Is there also a way to disaggregate the of color subgroups?
Yeah. It was in the presentation, the last
November.
November meeting.
Okay, I'll look
Yeah.
back at that one, thank you.
Yeah, but so kind of the intent, right? These presentations, what we're trying to do is build out something that we can repeat every year or provide updates on to look at. So we can certainly add that to this slide so that it tells the full story. So ASAR, our supervisors, our managers, our building and district leaders, again, you see the differences here. You definitely see an uptick post-COVID in terms of retirements and resignations, and varied reasons for those retirements and resignations, whether it was holding off until after the pandemic was over or other concerns that people had. I think we're aware that there are some leaders who left the district to go to suburbs, right? Some of our leaders. And again, we've had exit interviews with folks, and we are ensuring that when leaders leave the district, we're having sit-down conversations with them to learn more, to inform our practice, and to get feedback. In terms of Bente, this you can see clearly here in the layoff column the numbers, particularly in 2020, 2021, and you can see the numbers of retirements, resignations, and so on. Again, an uptick from pre-COVID levels. And then RAP, our paraprofessionals and our teaching assistants, similar story, pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic, and the numbers reflected here.
Can we also disaggregate the ASAR information? Okay, thanks.
Yes, we can do that. So you asked, well, what can we do? And so here's a list of things that we can do, right? Or that we need to ensure that we have in place, right? What keeps our staff, right? We need to play up that people are driven to have an impact on students, their families, and the city. People enter this profession, enter this work in the district so that they can do that. The other thing we can do in what works in successful places is that school leaders make an intentional effort to build strong relational capacity with their staff. They care for, value, and respect them, and they're intentional about how they go about those aims. It's important that leaders understand, specifically the people that work with them, what their concerns are, and then develop an intentional plan to try to address them. We see this take place in schools. There are staff get-togethers, there's staff team building, there's an intentional focus on those things to ensure that morale is boosted because it is difficult. We know that people are challenged, right? So the little things that we can do to focus on wellness and building team and camaraderie, and we're in this together and we're making change, those things are important. We also want to create opportunities for staff to lead professional development and to have feedback and input on the professional learning that they're provided. We hear this from unions. We know that people need mentoring. We know they need coaching. They need people who can help them to do those things. We need opportunities for folks to grow and to go up a career ladder. People want to move up, right? There needs to be opportunities for them to move up. They need to understand how they can move up, and they need to know that processes to advance are transparent and that they are objective. And it's not about who you know, but that there's a process. And what we know from teachers and leaders, principals and classroom teachers, is that they want autonomy. They don't want to be micromanaged on everything that they're doing, and they want to be supported by their leadership, both from the building leadership and the district leadership. Now, we have mandates and we have things we must do, but people want some autonomy. Those are the things that we see and we hear from individuals who perhaps turn over. So this was a concept I think I mentioned very briefly in passing from the podium in the past, but it's a strategy that we really need to employ, and all leaders in the district should be doing this. Doesn't matter what kind of leadership role you have, everyone should be employing in their toolbox of strategies stay interviews. I essentially did one myself today. Met with an employee, heard that she had some concerns, and just as the leader of my team, sat down with her to just listen and to immediately then try to change conditions to make it better for her in the workplace, because I don't want to lose her. There's research that says every leader, whether you're a grade level team leader, whether you're a principal, an assistant principal, a department head, can do this. And every leader should be thinking about who on my team that I work with is irreplaceable. Now, on some level, we're all replaceable, right? But as a leader, I know there's people on my team I don't want to lose. Those are the people I need to start with. I need to sit down with them and I need to talk to them about what they're challenged by. And I can't just assume that I know. It's actually creating the opportunity to sit down and have that discussion. And so that takes some time, but it's critically important. And so we want to call out to all of our leaders to do that, to think about who are your irreplaceables and to set up time with them. We'll be sharing out a protocol that they can use or adapt to make their own. It doesn't have to be formal. It shouldn't be, with a clipboard and a series of questions, but more conversational. And the closer and the more relationships you have with people, the better able you are to do that. The more investments you have in the people you work with, you can just walk in and sit down, shut the door, let's talk, right? But you've got to build those partnerships and that relationship first. Principals and other leaders may have a large staff, right? So they may not be on that level with every person, but the closer we can get there, the better. And when we have these conversations, a stay interview is a tool to help us understand why employees stay and what might cause them to leave. Stay interviews are preferable to exit interviews because in an exit interview, you've already lost the person. You've missed that chance, most likely, because they're usually telling you when they're giving their resignation, when they've already verbally or formally accepted another job offer. And yes, we should do exit interviews, but more important to do stay interviews to understand happiness or concerns, how they felt the last few months, how they felt the last year, and what they need differently, and what you as a leader, right, can do to change conditions. Extremely valuable and something all of our leaders in the district need to find time to do and to do early. The other strategy that we're going to be employing and building out is the creation of wellness champions. And this is to establish points of contact in each of our schools, people that are really committed to wellness and living, not only wellness, but living healthy and trying to be a liaison between the district and their school to ensure that when we have district-wide wellness activities or events or information, that we can share that with someone at the school and they can in turn champion or promote it or speak to it at a faculty meeting or just hang a flyer that we pass on. And so this is something that works in other organizations to have that touch point and to create a better place to work and to create a climate where we're one RCSD, where we're engaging and working through similar activities as a school district. The other thing that I think is important for us to all be aware of and for me to call out specifically tonight is our employee assistance program. And oftentimes people think of employee assistance with a stigma, right? That mental health or talking to a counselor. Yes, that's part of employee assistance, but our employee assistance program goes beyond just those traditional services and offers a really holistic approach to well-being, counseling, telehealth, teletherapy, mindfulness, wellness, health advocacy, but also these other things that our employees have access to, legal and financial advice, concierge, right? We've had employees that have to plan for a graduation party for their child and they need help finding a place to rent a large tent. You can contact our EAP and they will help you with that. And if you contact EAP for mental health concerns, you want to talk to a counselor, the school district doesn't know you're doing that. Any conversation you have with NextGen, our EAP provider, is fully confidential and it's between you and them, and they do not share any information about who they're speaking to. The only information that we learn is that over the past month, 30 people accessed the service, and this is the type of service that they accessed. But we don't know anything specific about the type of employee or who they are. We really want to encourage this, and folks in leadership positions, When we are talking with people that are challenged or struggling, this is a resource that we can be sharing with our employees. The last thing I want to highlight, whoops, I think there's a slide missing. The last thing I want to highlight is our legislative advocacy. We know that there's a teacher shortage, and we want to ensure that we continue to advocate for the waiver that exists currently for certified educators to earn above $35,000 in retirement. That has helped us to fill some of our positions. We want to ensure that that continues. We want to ensure that we can expand alternative teacher certification pathways and processes, and to simplify the existing certification process. There's still too many challenges and barriers in the way of teacher certification, and we would advocate for change. We want to ensure that our state provides pathways and provides tuition programs and financial assistance so that students or adults who are interested in becoming a teacher have access to funding and resources that help them meet that dream. We want to expand out-of-state reciprocity to simplify the status of those who live in other states and territories who want to come to New York State to teach, that they have immediate certification if they have certification elsewhere. Again, there are too many barriers and roadblocks to automatic certification if individuals teach in other states. We also want to advocate for some civil service reforms. We want to expand the same retiree earning waiver that exists for certified educators to all civil service type positions, because we know we can recruit and hire and retain staff, frankly, if we have that in place. We want to ensure a consistent administration of civil service exams. We recently got the results back from a clerical exam in December. The exam was administered in May. We didn't have the results of that exam until December, which caused delays, undue delays, in our ability to staff positions in the school district. The content of exams is not up to date. It is not modern. It is not fully connected to what people actually do in our schools and in the workforce, and that needs change. When we reach out to people who've taken civil service exams to see if they would be interested in working in the school district, we have to hard copy mail them a letter, and they have to return it hard copy. It's time to update that so that electronic email can also be used for that purpose. And we want to see that there's an expansion of the number of eligible employees for appointment to a rule of 5. Currently, the rule is 3. The top 3 scorers on civil service exams are to be the folks that are hired. We would like to see that expanded to 5 to give us more options. And so these are just a few of the advocacy needs that we have, and we would encourage the board's advocacy as well. In terms of future needs and next steps, we as a district need to implement stay interviews and to learn from them and to adapt from what we learn. We need to recruit wellness champions and build out our wellness program. We need to develop a retention task force that's super intentional about what we can do as a district around retention. And we need to ensure some legislative advocacy to continue efforts to recruit and retain in both certified educator positions and in the civil service. Thank you.
Dr. Miller, President Elliott has a question.
Well, in reference to the legislative advocacy for recruitment, I'm just wondering, and it's probably more to Commissioner Adams with regard to, do we have any of these items a part of our legislative agenda, Commissioner Adams? And if we're having our legislative breakfast, would these advocacy issues be something that we can present at our legislative breakfast?
Yes.
Okay. So is any of it on our agenda? And if not, is there a way in which?
So the way it is on our agenda. We do
Okay.
have that on our agenda, but you need to know that our agenda doesn't have verbatim every question that's going to be asked at that agenda.
Okay.
We're going to be, some things have changed. In fact, they're no longer the priority, such as foundation aid and
Right,
You know,
right,
so
yeah.
this leaves room for
Yeah.
making it a rounded out.
Something we can talk about at the legislative
Yeah.
breakfast. Dr. Carmine?
Yeah, so we are adding this information to the legislative breakfast.
All right,
Yes,
thank you.
absolutely.
Okay.
Commissioner Patterson, and then Commissioner Malloy.
Yes, thank you. So let me start with something positive. Recruitment and civil service reforms. I like, what I've heard from you, relative to that, the slide there. So kudos, for those changes. Relative to screen number 17, the only thing I'm not seeing on there, and having been contacted by teachers and administrators, the only thing that's missing is really school safety relative to slide number 17 and staff, dealing with staff retention. So those are some of the things that I'm hearing, that the reason that they're leaving deals with, school safety. And the last thing, you made a comment relative to, starting with employees that are strongest, relative to like a strategy change. I would challenge you to, those are your, as we say, your ride and dies. They're with you. But I would challenge you to really put your time and effort into the ones that aren't, the ones that are thinking of leaving, and, ways that we can retain them. And that, yes, it takes a lot of energy, but these are some good people that we're losing, that if I think they became the priority instead of the ones that are doing a great job, and they're with you, they're behind you, we know we have them, but also working just as hard to retain the ones that want to walk away. Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you. Commissioner Malloy.
Thank you. And this is just regarding the pipeline programming one more time. I'm looking at the civil service reform slide. And I don't know a lot about civil service exams other than that many of our jobs require taking and passing this test. Is that a test that we can help our students prepare for in school? Are there rules around that? What types of things that can we do to help students or track them into those types of programs?
So several of our Bente-like positions are non-competitive at the start, entry level, right? So such as cleaners. So there's no exams for those, but absolutely we can work with people who are interested to give them tips and strategies, and to take from people who have recently taken those exams and to share experiences. That's what some other school districts are doing and have done, and we need to be doing similarly.
Are there practice tests for those types of exams?
So there are access to study guides, and there is an ability to have some review of prior content, but it's not consistent across all.
So it wouldn't be like an SAT prep course that you see in the suburbs, helping their kids prepare for those types of exams, something that we could look at as a course to prepare kids for administrative assistant jobs, et cetera. I guess that's where
I would have to get back to, I'd have to get back to the board on that relative to whether that's something we could specifically do or not, given the rules of civil service. I would have to check.
I just see a lot of potential getting our own students to come back to us and work one day, whether that's in teaching or in custodial work or administrative assistant jobs. I just see a lot of potential there.
President Elliott.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. One of the issues is just in terms of the department itself and its ability to be able to, recruit staff. And, I brought to you a couple of issues with regard to just being able to apply online. That a couple of people, as you know, found that they were not able to utilize the that particular employment application page online, and come to find out that the application, the job notice itself was not on there. So what work is being done within the department? Of course, you know, we've got infrastructure issues in the entire district, but how are you positioning the department in terms of ensuring that your department is meeting the needs of the people who may leave? And I know you just mentioned about you sat down with one person and interviewed that person, but how does the department become more customer service oriented? And I know you've got some vacancies within your own department, I believe you still have. So, but how do we receive, you know, people who are interested in working in our district, and that we don't see the HR department as being one of the barriers that may help them to make the decision not to, you know, work in the Rochester City School District? How much of the department has been that, you know, people are, you know, maybe retiring or going someplace else, and how can your department improve in its management in order to, again, position ourselves so that we can have a robust recruiting and, you know, sustaining the employees that we have?
Thank you. Yeah, I think what has been helpful and successful for us has been being out in the community and working with community together to recruit and to meet with people where they are, to help them through the process, and remove confusion too, right? The civil service process can be confusing for people. It's foreign even for people who've worked in education their entire career, because they don't engage within it every single day. And folks listening may not even know that in civil service, you apply to the district, but you also apply to the county. And in fact, you also need to fill out a separate application to the county that the county reviews and evaluates against the job description. The job descriptions for civil service positions are not exclusively developed by the district. We may propose a position and have a job description that we've written, and we send it to the county for their feedback, and they say, yes, that's a fine description you've developed, but we already have a position that exists that's like that. And it's not 100% match, but they will tell us that's the description you're going to use for that position. And so sometimes when we look at job descriptions, that may be why we see some of those things. But in the past, we also posted positions in a way that I think led the public to believe that they could apply and they would be hired into the job, right? Or be potentially hired into the job without fully understanding you have to have taken, if it's a competitive position, you have to have taken the corresponding exam for that position, and you have to be one of the top scorers on that, right? So educating the public about that and making it super clear on our job board that that's what it is helps to eliminate frustration. And so how we post jobs, we've cleaned that up to create better clarity. And so what I learned was happening is that people would apply to a position, they wanted that position, but it's a competitive position where they never took the exam. And then that just leads to a lot of disappointment, because there's the wait for when the position closes and the process of ultimately selecting and then notifying the person that they weren't selected when in fact they hadn't even been interviewed, right, or contacted. But it all comes down to, in part, right, that they weren't even eligible because they weren't on the competitive exam list. So cleaning that up from our end so that users who are interacting with our job boards understand that.
So how many positions within the district are civil service, require civil service, require a civil service exam?
Oh, I'm probably going to have to get back to you on that. Just to, if we have 5,400 positions in the district and 3,200 of them are teachers, right? You'd subtract from there, and not all of those remaining are competitive. But I can provide further detail on that number.
Yep, thank you.
Commissioner Adams?
Yeah, I'm just curious about this graph here. It says why do teachers leave the profession? And it says 2019, is that when these were taken? Because if this was pre December 19th of 2019, or in pre-COVID, it's a totally different mindset with folks. So I would definitely be interested. Even if this is 2019, it's still informative. But maybe next year, this time or whatever, I'd like to see another updated one. That's all. That's all I have. No question.
I would say you're absolutely right. The next slide details 2022, and the reason I was comfortable continuing to include this is that I think from our experience and our data, it's still consistent. And one of the things about New York State is that our teachers' contracts are more competitive than other places in the country, and so we may not have said that compensation and benefits was a top reason, but we're hearing more of that because of inflation. And so I do think that this is still applicable to the district, but we will share updated data as it's available too.
And also, just for the public, because I'd be assuming people know, when I just said December 19th, that's when we laid off a whole bunch of folks, December 19th, for those in the audience. Okay, just need to clarify that.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. And if there are no additional questions, that concludes tonight's presentation and meeting for the Human Resources Committee of the Whole. And in addition, I will just add, if you choose to, there is a board meeting survey that you are all welcome to take. And with that, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Oh, motioned by
Second.
President Elliott, seconded by Commissioner Malloy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Have a good night, everyone. There's no executive session, so we're going home. Have a good night.
Wow.